$3.2 trillion, that is the modern equivalent of the debt that made Rome's rise possible. It paid for legion salaries, it financed siege engines, war machines, and fleets. It sustained wars that lasted decades. It built one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen, and ironically it also set in motion the process that destroyed it. Most people believe Rome fell because barbarians broke through its gates. Images of a burning city, looted temples, and fleeing citizens dominate popular memory, but the real story begins much earlier, before swords and arrows, before walls were breached, centuries earlier in Rome's financial records. Imagine Rome at the height of its power, sunlight reflecting off marble columns, senators walking slowly through the forum in white togas, incense rising in front of temples, legions drilling in perfect formation outside the city, cargo ships lined up along the Tiber River. From the outside, Rome looked eternal. Gold flowed into the city. Victories filled the maps. Each year, Rome's borders expanded a little more. But beneath this spectacle, a silent problem was growing. Every conquest had to pay for the next one. Every victory created a larger army, longer borders, and a more expensive system to maintain. The year 168 BC marked a turning point. Rome crushed Macedonia at the Battle of Pydna. The amount of plunder taken was unprecedented. Returning armies carried statues, gold, jewelry, royal treasuries, and priceless artifacts. Victory celebrations lasted for days. Crowds filled the streets. Temples overflowed. The loot was so vast that the Roman state stopped collecting direct taxes from its citizens for years. To ordinary Romans, it felt like a miracle. Many believed Rome had discovered an endless source of wealth. But what Rome truly learned was far more dangerous. War was extremely profitable. Conquest stopped being only about security. It became a business model. Wealthy Romans noticed this quickly. They began financing wars. They loaned money to generals. They supplied legions with food and equipment. When campaigns succeeded, they claimed a share of the spoils. They grew rich without ever fighting. A new elite emerged, not those who fought wars, but those who profited from them. Meanwhile, the burden remained on ordinary people. In its early days, Rome relied on citizen soldiers. Farmers and craftsmen fought in short campaigns, then returned home. Taxes were low. The state was small. But as the empire expanded, this system collapsed. Wars lasted longer. Years turned into decades. A farmer could not leave his land for that long. Fields went uncultivated. Families lost their livelihoods. Villages began to empty. Rome's solution was a standing army, professional soldiers, salaried legions, permanent military units. This made Rome militarily powerful, but financially vulnerable. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had to maintain around 30 legions on a permanent basis. Along with auxiliary troops, cavalry, engineers, medics, weapon makers, and naval forces, hundreds of thousands of people were part of a massive military machine. That machine required roads, fortresses, ships, weapons, food, and constant logistics. Most of the imperial budget was now spent simply keeping the army alive. Rome could no longer survive without constant expansion, but there was nowhere left to conquer. The revenue gap grew. To compensate, Rome outsourced tax collection to private companies known as publicani. These firms paid the state up front, then extracted as much as possible from the provinces. Profit was their goal, and coercion was their method. Villages were stripped of resources, land changed hands, small farmers fell into debt and lost their property. Financial power slowly shifted from the state to private elites. Then expansion stopped entirely. There was no new plunder, no wealthy enemies left. But expenses remained unchanged. Armies still guarded distant borders. The state could no longer balance its finances. At this point, Rome intervened in its currency. For centuries, the Roman denarius had been trusted across continents. Now the state began reducing its silver content. At first, the change was subtle. Later, it became obvious. New coins looked bright but felt light. Their cores were mostly copper. People noticed. Merchants raised prices. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Trust disappeared. Inflation increased over generations. Grain prices multiplied. Money stopped circulating. The state attempted to fix prices by law, but no decree could give real value to debased coinage. The wealthy remained protected. Their assets were in land and gold. They had walls, estates, and private guards. The poor lost their savings. Cities grew quiet. Public baths closed. Markets emptied. Some people sold themselves into slavery to escape taxes. Rome was rotting from within. When barbarian groups crossed the borders in 406 AD, Rome still looked like an empire. Its walls were intact. Its monuments stood tall. From the outside, it still projected power. But inside, Rome was already hollow. Its economy had collapsed under the weight of centuries of debt and mismanagement. Its currency no longer held value. Coins circulated, but trust did not. Trade slowed, then stopped. Savings vanished. Wealth concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Its army, once the most disciplined force in history, was no longer reliably paid. Soldiers demanded higher wages or refused service. Loyalty shifted from the state to individual commanders. Defense weakened not because Rome lacked soldiers, but because it could no longer sustain them. Its population was exhausted. Generations had lived through inflation, taxation, and decline. Cities emptied. Infrastructure decayed. Public institutions stopped functioning. What remained was not an empire, but the appearance of one. The walls still stood. The statues still shone. But life inside was fading. Rome did not fall in a single battle. There was no single moment. No dramatic collapse that ended everything at once. Instead, Rome unraveled slowly. It collapsed through mounting debt, elite extraction of wealth, the erosion of its currency, and a system that depended entirely on constant expansion. When expansion stopped, the system turned inward and began consuming itself. By the time external enemies arrived, the damage had already been done. The invasions did not destroy Rome. They merely revealed how fragile it had already become. The ruins we see today are not the cause of Rome's fall, they are what was left behind, because history teaches the same lesson again and again. Financial collapse comes first, then society fractures, empires fall last, and that is Rome's enduring warning. If this perspective gave you a new way of looking at history, consider subscribing. History always tells the truth. The real challenge is learning how to see it. And that is exactly what I am here to show you.